Welcome back to the Checkdown Pod. We'll start off this week's episode, as we always do, with the check-in, where we'll give our thoughts and takeaways regarding last week's Divisional Round slate. Then we'll throw the red flag, a segment in which we'll each give our hot takes and then discuss. Finally, we'll end the show with the rundown, where we'll preview this upcoming championship weekend and what to expect from those games. I'm Richard, and now let's throw it to Harry.
It's great to be here, back again after some questionable games, but a pretty solid slate of games this week. And yeah, I'm ready to get started. Should we start with the Chiefs versus the Jags?
Yep, the early Saturday game. Let's go. We could start with that.
Yeah. So my biggest take from this is Mahomes is just the best quarterback on the planet. And listen, we've known that, but more so that Mahomes is just in a tier of his own. It's Patrick Mahomes is tier one, and then Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, and that might just be the end of tier two, but maybe some of the other guys. Mahomes is just on a different planet, and he was hurt, so he just wasn't playing up to his standard. He didn't have the best game of all time, but seeing himself be a little bit limited, but still being a playmaker and still, doing great things out there, it shows how much better he is than maybe any other quarterback in the NFL.
No,
that was my biggest takeaway.
For sure. It's definitely, you saw to come back after that injury, which I don't know. We'll talk about it when we're previewing this week's games, this week's championship game later. But to see how he came back from that, and he's clear he was hurting, and still able to close it out and make sure the Chiefs got the win. Do you have anything else about the Chiefs offense that you want to?
One thing I noticed, or I think Chris Collinsworth pointed it out, and then I kind of continued to notice it, and it's kind of been a theme. Is Jerick McKinnon is just such a good blocker, and him being out there, he can't run the ball the way Isaiah Pacheco can, but just his ability to block and just be that safety blanket for Mahomes is so valuable to the Chiefs. And I think the McKinnon-Pacheco duo is just so much better. We've known this than Clyde, and I just don't see a future for Clyde.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think we'll talk about that more when we get to the offseason. But probably one of the more underrated duos, just the way that, McKinnon is just a very good third down back. And Pacheco's he runs with power, but also, I think he showed a little bit of burst and this weekend.
Yeah. And I just think the way that they're two very different players. But they're very good at what they're good at, and the Chiefs are able to use them as such. And I think that they together create a lot more success for the Chiefs offense than a Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who might be a better running back than either of them. And he might be more balanced, and he might be, but I just think those two really create a lot of offense for the Chiefs. And neither of them would be very great outside of the Chiefs, I think.
Yeah.
I think in the Chiefs system, they're perfect.
I think like how we spoke about the 49ers Shanahan system last week being kind of user-proof, what Andy Reid can do for this offense. You even see with the disparity of the weapons of the remaining teams. And on the Bengals, you have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Joe Mixon. And then in the NFC, you have for the 49ers, Debo, CMC, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle. And the Eagles, they have probably one of the best receiving duos in the league in Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. So what Mahomes is able to do outside of Travis Kelce, which maybe not the most talented receiver room, or just skill position talent in general, and what Andy Reid and Mahomes are able to get out of these guys is pretty impressive.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about the Chiefs offense is that outside, obviously, of Travis Kelce, none of them are particularly talented or are particularly amazing. Not that they're untalented, like Juju's still a good player, but I think all of them again play their role really well, and they might not all be great, but they're all good at something, and it brings a lot of value to the team, and they're just kind of able to, balance off of each other, and yeah,
Yeah, definitely. I think that the way that they all kind of are a little bit different. So it allows for them to each fulfill the roles that are expected of them. And you just see that. I mean, I don't know how you leave Travis Kelce as open as he was. Seems like a lot of this game, but I don't know. Yeah.
yeah, and
Um,
also just like the Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes connection is so good.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, Travis Kelce is just uber talented, but the connection that he has with Mahomes is like it's almost more valuable than how talented he is.
Yes. I think that I mean, if you put him on a different offense, he's still, I mean, a top two tight end in the NFL. But I don't know how another offense could get as much out of him as the Chiefs do, and like Patrick Mahomes, that connection. Um, Anything now moving on to the defensive side of the ball for the Chiefs? Is there anything that you liked or maybe some potential issues for this coming week?
I mean, the Chiefs have never been the most talented defensive team, but I think that they are like I think they're kind of like low key pretty good. Like George Karlaftis is a pressure machine. You see they do have some guys in the secondary and Trent McDuffie, he's a rookie, but he's pretty decent. Um, Justin Reed is not bad, and he's also their emergency kicker, which is
Yeah,
really funny.
yeah,
Um, and you know, I just think it's not a great unit overall, but it's like I think it's a little underrated, and people kind of throw it back to these Chiefs teams. Like I just mentioned, a bunch of rookies and young guys, and Nick Bolton's pretty good. Like those are young rookies, young guys. People kind of assume that the Chiefs are the Chiefs of kind of 2019 with this high-powered explosive offense, which they still do have, but I think that they're much more complete than I think that they're given credit for.
yeah. You definitely see maybe a team that doesn't have to rely on the big deep play and the explosivity of Patrick Mahomes and the Tyree. Even without Tyreek Hill, you thought that maybe this team wouldn't be able to go as far as they've gotten to this point. Um, but their defense looks like it's good enough with that offense to get them into the Super Bowl and probably win it. Um, is there anything else on the Chiefs that you want to discuss?
Nah,
Or
I think we
okay,
can move on to the Jags. And I want to start off with the Jags should be very proud of what they accomplished this season. And no one
yeah,
expected them to beat the Chiefs this week. And they didn't play their best game. To be honest, they could have beat the Chiefs if they played their best game. But I don't think that it's some like what they did was something to scoff at. I think that, you know, being able to stay competitive-ish in a game with the Chiefs is very impressive for that young Jags team. And they're only going to get better. They're adding Calvin Ridley next season. They still have Christian Kirk. Travis Etienne is still fantastic. You know,
what
it's a it's a very solid core that they've built offensively over there. And the offensive line is not bad. Um, I really like what the Jags have and what they're building for next season.
yeah, it looks. I mean, with the emergence of Trevor Lawrence, into maybe like as like what they expected when they picked him number one overall. That they have a lot of potential for next year. Although I think I saw it earlier, they are not in a good cap situation, and that's more stuff we'll get into in the offseason. But it'll be interesting to see what decisions they make with like Evan Ingram, pending free agent, played a big role this season.
Yeah. But I do think I just think overall even different roles obviously, but even if you and it never works like this where you just swap out one and gain another. Calvin Ridley is so good though that swapping out Evan Ingram for Ridley, like the offense is bound to become more explosive and high powered. And maybe you do still need to keep a Calvin Ridley. or maybe you still do need to keep an Evan Ingram, and I do think that he will be a priority free agent for them. But I
Yeah,
don't. I think that this team is bound to become more explosive, and I think with how poised Trevor Lawrence is, like after the game, he waited for all of his teammates to go into the locker room, and he congratulated all of them on a great season, and like the kid's got moxie is the best way to describe Trevor Lawrence. And yeah, I just think he's more like he really has the support of the locker room behind him. And I think he has a great future. And I think the Jags have a great future. And I think having a quarterback of Trevor Lawrence's ability is like not where he's at right now, but where I think he'll be at in the future is so important to winning a Super Bowl, which I'll get into a little bit later. And I think Trevor Lawrence is one of those quarterbacks that you can win a Super Bowl with, even if the talent isn't perfect around him.
yeah, and I think as you said, they got a lot of young talent. Even Calvin Ridley is still relatively young. Um, but Travis Etienne, I thought he had a really nice game. I don't know. I think he only had 10 carries. Seemed like maybe there was an opportunity to get him more involved. I think he was just running all over the Chiefs defense, um, averaging over 4 yards after contact. Um,
Yeah.
just interesting, but overall, I think, as you said, the Jaguars have a lot to be proud of and look forward to for next year.
Yeah.
Is there anything on defense that you? I mean, they held the Chiefs to 27 points, which is like, I mean, that's a lot, but for the Chiefs, that's not. They kept them in a position to win this game. So, is there any takeaways, either positive or negative, from this defensive unit?
Um, I did not really write anything down for the Jags defensive unit. I think overall there are some players on there that you can be happy with building, like Foye Oluokun's quite good. Devin Lloyd definitely had an up and down season, but he's a good player. Tyson Campbell was a great corner this season. Josh Allen's a great football player. Trayvon Walker, the jury is definitely still out, but like I think they have a lot of young pieces to build with for this defense. And yeah, that's kind of what I've got.
Yeah, no, I think I agree that again, like on the offense, they got a lot of ascending talent on the defensive side of the ball. Um,
Yeah.
so now if you're ready, we can move on to the Saturday night game, which
It
I know,
pains me to talk about this game.
yeah, difficult
It
subject for
pains
you.
me.
Um,
Yeah. Listen, I did not expect the Giants to win, but I also did not expect like this beating that that they received. And I think the main takeaway, which I've had this takeaway from way before, but I think a lot of Giants fans are starting to see it now. Daniel Jones is not a franchise guy. And he didn't play particularly horribly, but he needs to elevate. To be a franchise quarterback, you need to elevate. And I think there's also I'm gonna come back to Daniel Jones in a second for the Daniel Jones contract extension. Um, and maybe we'll come back to that in another episode, or actually we'll come back to it in my hot take. But
okay.
I just think he's not the guy. Um, he he just he doesn't elevate a roster, and I think he's a good player. And if the Giants franchise tag him, I won't be upset. If they give him like a $15 million per year contract extension for maybe like 3 years, I won't be too upset either. But you can't give him like $28 million a year or something. He's just not worth that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because I don't know if he has the Giants backed into a corner a bit with them not going to want to restart at quarterback after this season and having coming off, I think what we could both agree was by far his best year. He could command maybe a deal with worth upwards of 20 million a year for, like you said, maybe that 3 year range, 4 year range. Um, but yeah, anything the Giants offense, I know was not a great day for them, but anything else? Yeah,
Yeah.
got it.
I do think Dayball's schemes. This was not a very well coached game by
Yeah,
Dayball, but this is the first not very well. It took him until this game to have a not very well coached game. And we also kind of saw that like this is why the Giants got murdered, is because it wasn't a well coached game, and the Giants have been carried by Brian Dayball all season. He's really put them on his back. Um, and yeah, I think the decision to go for it early on, but then like I don't think that killed them. I think they lose this game one way or the other. Um, but yeah, I think it wasn't a great game, a great showing from Dayball. But I'm very excited for the future of Brian Dayball.
yeah. I think that what this game showed is that maybe the Giants are a team that the head coach for any team, I think, doesn't really they're very important, but at the end of the day, it's like you got to play with the players that you have. And in this game, we saw that Brian Dable didn't elevate those players, and his rough day, should we call it, was not why the Giants lost, but certainly didn't help.
Yeah. Just overall not great from the Giants offense. For the Giants defense, I will say, unless you had anything to add on the Giants
No,
offense.
let's go to the defenses.
Actually, I'll add one thing, and this has to do with their offseason, is that if they are between Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley, and I will not advocate for a running back over a quarterback 98% of the time, but in this instance, they need to keep Saquon Barkley over Daniel Jones. He is the cog to this offense. He is the reason this offense is so successful. And I think you can replace Daniel Jones with most guys in the league. Like, I think that there are a bunch of other guys in the league who could have replicated similar to what Daniel Jones replicated this season. And yeah, if they are between those two guys, they have to pick Saquon over Daniel Jones.
Yeah, this is interesting because this also my hot take for later is also having to do with the Giants, and it's a little bit of a different perspective, but we'll get to that later.
I'm very
So
interested to hear.
yeah,
On to the Giants defense.
do you have anything to say about their defense, which I think they played better than the box score or the final score says they did, although definitely wasn't a good day for them.
Yeah, I think they got a little bit, I don't want to say unlucky, but they had a bunch of situations where it's just like Adoree Jackson slipping on that play leads to a touchdown. Daniel Jones throws an interception, so they kind of start off in plus territory. Like the defense they played poorly, but I think the defense was kind of put in a situation where it's hard to succeed for them. And so yeah, but I do think that what needs to be addressed a lot is the Giants linebacker core.
Yes,
And it's like
I was gonna bring that
Jalen
up.
Smith. Yeah, like Jalen Smith, Landon Collins, and like it's just like those guys are so bad. Like they're so bad that it's like maybe the Giants need another cornerback because cornerback is a more important position,
Yeah.
but you just cannot have Brent Landon Collins and Jalen Smith
I
as your
didn't
linebackers.
I think Gerard Davis got the start this weekend, and that's
Yeah,
it's
Gerard. Yeah, Landon
probably
Collins
even
didn't even
worse.
play.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, no,
it's awful.
the cornerback point, I think I don't know. I was pretty high on the Adoree Jackson signing last offseason. When
Yeah,
when
and I
they
do
made
like
that.
Adoree Jackson.
Yeah, so I think he's played pretty well, but I mean, no doubt they missed the presence of James Bradbury on the other side.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that's the unfortunate reality is that sometimes good players are going to have to be cut with the cap hell that Dave Gettleman put them in. Um,
Yeah,
but we'll see what interesting when you have probably you got your quarterback and your running back, and then you got Dexter Lawrence due for the extension. So it'll be interesting to see how they have a lot more money to work with this year, but what if anyone doesn't come back or who they can replace them with.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Leonard Williams talked about maybe a potential pay cut. So that could free up even a little bit more money.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I mean his contract is kind of crazy. I think his cap
right.
hit for this season is over $30 million.
Yeah. Like, I don't even know if Dexter Lawrence could command that kind of money. And Dexter Lawrence might be the best nose tackle in football right now.
Definitely for the Giants 3-4 scheme. I don't know if anyone could play it better.
Right.
That nose position. I mean, maybe Vina Vea has an argument, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Dexter
There
Lawrence.
are other guys,
Yeah,
but
but Dexter Lawrence, yeah, he definitely had the best year at nose tackle in football, I think you have to say.
definitely.
And then now I didn't spend a lot of time on the Giants because you're a Giants fan, but you got to talk about the Eagles. What did you like? Maybe some things that you're a little bit concerned about for that Eagles offense.
I think the one thing, and it's hard to say that I'm concerned about it because they just didn't have to do that much of it given where they came out. So I actually don't think I'm so concerned about it. But I think this is a run first offense. And if they get into a shootout, I think that this won't be such an issue for them against a team like the Niners, who are kind of also in that same boat. But if they get into, but against the Bengals or against the Chiefs, and I'm not necessarily saying they beat the Niners, but I don't think that this will become an issue for them against the Niners. If they play the Chiefs or if they play the Bengals and they get into a shootout with them and they need to rely on Jalen Hurts to throw the ball because they're down 10, Jalen Hurts is a good passer of the football, but he's not Joe Burrow. He's not Josh Allen. He's not Patrick Mahomes. He's not a Justin Herbert. He can't throw the ball the way those guys can. And I
Yeah.
think that he's a great thrower of the football, like much improved from last season.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt.
But I just don't, he can't keep up with those guys. And
Yeah.
that's the biggest weakness that I noticed for them.
No, I agree. I think part of it was, again, Adoree Jackson had a pretty nice game, but the receivers weren't as much of a factor as maybe you'd expect them to be, considering the Eagles put up 38 points. Specifically, AJ Brown seemed like he was not really getting open so much. So I don't know if they're concerned about that. I mean, he's been one of the best receivers in football this year. So I don't think you're too concerned about that if you're the Eagles, but just finding a way to get the ball in the hands of their receivers when probably inevitably, if they were to make the Super Bowl, they're going to play against a high-powered offense like that.
And I think I feel pretty good about AJ Brown because, the Giants do actually an oddly good job of limiting yards after catch, which they didn't do this game, but like generally do. So the game plan might not have been to feed AJ Brown the way that they normally do and to rely on Devontae Smith. And the Giants corners outside of Adoree Jackson are not that good. So overall, I feel like, and Dallas Goedert attacking that linebacking core, and Xavier McKinney didn't have a great game. So just overall, like they really controlled the middle of the field well, and I'm not concerned for AJ Brown.
Yeah, I think he should be fine, especially against a 49ers cornerback group that maybe struggled a little bit in this game, although we'll get to them later. I think one last takeaway for this Eagles offense is that offensive line is for real.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I think that's been a huge part of Jalen Hurts. Obviously, he's had a very similar offensive line, one of the best offensive lines in football every year he's been there. But I mean, Landon Dickerson looks like a very, very good pick. Yeah, I mean, Jason Kelce is a great leader on that offensive line. I think that their pass protection this week looked to me like it was probably the best performance for an offensive line in the playoffs so far, at least in the pass department. and running the ball. They were just I would say the Eagles backs, like they're definitely have some talent, but they're not the most explosive guys. And they're Kenneth Gainwell was springing long runs. Miles Sanders was just constantly getting 5 yards. Um, so yeah, their offensive line is a key reason to why this Eagles team is has gone as far as they're going.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add on to that by just saying that like it's not even just the offensive line, and while they definitely have the best offensive line in the NFL, another just part of their success overall is that they don't have weaknesses so much as a team. Like I can't think of one spot where the Eagles are bad. They're not. There's no place to attack them. Which they just are the most complete team in the NFL, and that doesn't mean that I think they're the best team in the NFL because I actually don't. We'll get to that in a second. But I do think that they are the most complete team. There is no weaknesses. It's hard to game plan against them.
Yes, that.
Yeah.
I mean, this kind of that also goes with the defense, but anything that you want to talk about on the defensive side of the ball?
Nothing in particular other than kind of just what I said. They're just a monstrous group. They're so good defensively. And I saw this stat. They have like I think 4 or 5 guys who had 10 plus sacks this season, which
Yeah,
is and Hassan Reddick had I think like 16 or something like
yeah.
that,
Hassan
15.
Reddick
Um,
is just he might be one of he constantly seems to be underrated just because the Cardinals didn't use him right. They tried to play him off
correct.
ball, but now that he's just like rushing the passer off that edge, he's like it helps when you have guys like Fletcher Crocs and Javon Hargrave, another probably very underrated guy, next to you, but he looks like a premier edge rusher.
Yeah, he's looked very good. I think he's definitely benefited from having those 101s and a speed rusher like him. Like if he's getting double teamed, I think he's kind of knocked out. And you can't double team him with Hargrave, Cox, and Brandon Graham too on the other end.
And
Um,
it's like what they've done in the middle of the season, even adding Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh and trading for Robert Quinn. So it's not only it's a very deep unit also, and you obviously have Jordan Davis, first round pick this year, who had a little bit of an up and down season, but I think that he'll play a big role next year.
yeah. And I think just overall, like I think Hassan Reddick I think to some extent he might be a little bit overrated because of the guys surrounding him, and he gets one-on-ones where the guys who have the sack production that he had this year, like Nick Bosa is getting double teamed, Parsons is getting double teamed, Max Crosby's getting double teamed, and he's not. So I think
Yeah,
to that extent he might like he's not a top 5 edge rusher, but he's definitely really blossomed and he's become, kind of one of the more under like at a certain point he's overrated and at a certain point he's
yeah,
underrated depending on kind of where you're looking at it from and who you're talking to. um and he, just like the way the Cardinals used him was not ideal, and coming into this Eagles offense where he's being used fantastically and just as that, speed rusher who's just gonna, get at the quarterback and force him to step up and get into that, monstrous inside with Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox, Von Hargrave is that's fantastic.
yeah. No, I think you hit the nail on the head. There's that defensive line. It allows for production from everyone just because you can't double team anyone in particular. And another spot, like you just see it. Not only does this team seem to have no holes, just how deep that the depth is impressive. Um, I think like even when you look at just one more thing I want to point out from this defense was CJ Gardner Johnson is really, really good. And I think what did they get him for a 5th round pick or something, 4th round pick from the Saints?
Something outrageous.
And he's young and he's been incredible this year. And he had another really nice game. Um, I thought they did a really good job. Not that the Giants offense really is so explosive, but they didn't allow the Giants to get anything down the field. Um, So yeah, if you have anything else to add on the Eagles.
Nah, nothing else.
Okay,
Let's
so
segue to the Bengals versus the Bills.
probably the most anticipated game of the weekend.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I am a little disappointed with this game going into the playoffs. This and whoever the Chiefs played in the conference championship were the games that I was looking forward to the most.
Yeah,
Um, and this game, it didn't. I don't want to say it disappointed, but it kind of disappointed.
I
Um,
I think you had everything that the Bills would have wanted to win this game. They're very big on like they played in their home stadium, which as we spoke about last week, seemed a little bit unfair. But so they had
right.
the Bills Mafia there. They're very big on like embracing that cold weather. It was a snow game, the classic like what you put your Madden game on. Um, and you saw DeMar Hamlin was there, which was great. But I don't know, it just Josh Allen really he was outplayed by Joe Burrow. That's I think a big part
Absolutely.
of it.
And I kind of always thought that Allen and Burrow were really close, neck and neck as the number two guy. And honestly, I'm never a fan of, oh, this guy played better in the playoffs against this
Yeah,
guy, or this guy's team won in the playoffs against this guy's team, so therefore he's better. But I think Burrow has played either like the best or the second best quarterback in the NFL. Like I said on last week's pod, kind of for all of the second half of the season, like he's arguably been the best quarterback, if not the second best, for that time span. And it's just, I think you're getting to a point where Joe Burrow might be better than Josh Allen. And I don't know who I
yeah,
would take. They're both fantastic and you can't go wrong. But just, I think this is Joe Burrow's. I was always a Joe Burrow guy. I loved him at LSU. I even loved him before he had his breakout season, um, as an SEC enthusiast. Um, but I've always been a Joe Burrow guy. I've always been high on him, and to see him like really, I drafted him in my keeper fantasy league his rookie year, and that's working wonders for me right now. Just seeing him blossom the way that he has is like it's fantastic. He's just so Tom Brady, but more athletic, and it's like a weird comparison because he's not, but it's like he kind of is.
yeah.
And it's like Joe Burrow just amazes me every week.
No, definitely. It's definitely gotten to the point where Joe Burrow is able to make everything look very easy on the football field. And he's great. I mean, I would say probably only behind Mahomes, the second best pocket passer in the NFL. And I mean, he was dealing with a banged up offensive line, which I thought played better than I was expecting. Um, but yeah, he really just, you saw the Joe Burrow experience of just, came into Buffalo, he was cool, he was calm. He just played within himself. Whereas I think on the other side, you saw Josh Allen, maybe a little bit of flashes of that Wyoming Josh Allen and first year, even second year Josh Allen, where he was just kind of a little bit reckless with the ball at times.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that from Josh Allen, um, all season, or not even all season, because the first couple weeks he was playing
Yeah.
fantastic. And then like
I think specifically in that
this,
second half.
yeah, is when we kind of started seeing it a lot more. Um, and I kind of wanted to talk about Joe Burrow getting the ball out quickly.
Yeah.
Um, he had more pressures this game at 12. Last week he had 11 pressures against him. This week he had 12. He was only sacked once, and his time to throw went down. It was really basically the same. But just he did such a good job. And you even saw it like on that I think it was a touchdown to Jamar Chase, like the way he just kind of stepped up in the pocket, threw the ball, not really on the run, um, but kind of like a little bit on the run, and just like he did such a good job of knowing that his offensive line was going to break down. He didn't have so much time to throw, but he had to get the ball out quickly, and he had to rely on those playmakers, and he had to do a good job of reading the defense, and he did. A fantastic game from Joe Burrow.
Yeah. You definitely saw Joe Burrow carry this Bengals team. Um, And not that the rest of the team didn't play well, it's just he maybe
He elevated them.
maybe his one of the best performances of his career. I don't know if that's crazy to say. Um, it was just he played about as good of a game as you would have wanted him to.
Yeah. And he didn't do anything crazy. He
Yeah,
wasn't doing those Mahomes 70-yard explosive plays, but he was just locked in every play. He didn't make a mistake. He was poised, and it was a great game.
no, definitely. And I mean, that's not really his style as much. I mean, we saw that a little
Right.
bit of LSU of him just like kind of chucking it down to Jamar Chase, but in the end, like now he's more polished in season and he's just playing within himself. So I think that should the Bengals got to good themselves a good quarterback. I don't know what else to
Absolutely.
say. He had no turnover worthy plays this week, according to PFF. Um, yeah, I think the Bengals. I mean, we'll get to this later, in the rundown, but will it's a lot of next week is going to depend on Patrick Mahomes' ankle because
Right.
the quarterback level of talent in these quarterbacks is, I think, closer than a lot of people thought it would have thought at the beginning of the year.
Absolutely.
Anything on the Bengals defensive side of the ball that you liked?
I think the cornerbacks surprisingly hold up a little bit better than you think.
Yeah.
Like, and as much as a Giants fan, as much as I hate to say it, Eli Apple is not the worst player in the NFL. He's still not great, but he's not like the worst player in the NFL. And he's definitely not as good as his Twitter antics would have you believe. Um, but he's actually overall a pretty solid football player. And yeah,
You know, and I think just to add on about the quarterbacks, the way that they're able to use like Mike Hilton as that chess piece, and he's coming in on blitzes. I think Josh Allen was really flustered with that. He got some free rushes on Allen. Um, and yeah, it was overall. I mean, you saw or didn't see it, but heard what happened with Stephon Diggs after the game. He was frustrated that his team lost. I thought they did a very nice job, kind of making him a non-factor in this game.
absolutely. And I'm blanking on his name. He has two
Oh,
last names, but
Cam
yeah,
Taylor Britt.
the
He had a
Nebraska
great
kid.
game. Yeah, he
He
had a
had a
great
great
game.
game.
I mean,
Um,
the Bengals, I think, arguably missing their best corner with Chidobe Awuzie on IR. But
who's probably been he was probably a top 10 cornerback this season,
yeah,
or something close to it.
he was I think the Bengals brought him in last year. And he's just been great for them. So I mean, the way Cam Taylor Britt was able to step up this week, and I think he was matched up on Stephon Diggs a good amount of the time. I don't think Eli Apple was traveling with Diggs. As crazy as
Which is
that is to
crazy to
say.
say.
Yeah. But it was a really nice game for that defense. And just one more thing, just as a Giants fan, I'm sorry, it pains me to say this, but how they just the Bengals got BJ Hill for Billy Price. It's
Oh,
just I don't know what else, like I don't know what you could say about that. He just
it's
is a run stuffing machine.
Dave Gettleman. What are you doing?
um yeah, it's just that defensive line played well. It seemed like Josh Allen was a little bit, I mean, he was pretty uncomfortable that entire game.
Yeah.
Um
And the pass rush with Trey Hendrickson and with Sam Hubbard, it's a very underrated edge duo. It's not like you don't really talk about it that much. You don't none of those guys are like top 10 guys or premier guys, but they're both like very low key guys. Hubbard takes a lot of the double teams and Hendrickson, really eats up the sacks, and it's just yeah, you feel pretty good about the Bengals as a whole.
yeah, I think I was one of those people who was a little bit skeptical of the Bengals replacing Carl Lawson, a guy who showed a lot of the advanced stats, said was primed for a breakout year with the Jets last year when they signed him, for Trey Hendrickson on a longer term deal, who maybe had the sacks but wasn't necessarily getting the pressures and looked like maybe he was just walking into a couple. But he's looked great for the Bengals these past 2 years.
Yeah. And the Bengals have just done a really good job of signing guys while their market value is lower.
Yeah.
And yeah,
I don't know if there's anything else to add about the Bengals, and if I mean, you want to touch on anything for Buffalo? This
I
is
think
just
the one thing I'm going to say is that I think a lot of people are like, oh, the Bills have been championship contenders for all this time. Like I keep seeing this post where it's like, oh, the Bills have been championship contenders for all this time. But they haven't won anything. Josh Allen hasn't won any MVPs. He hasn't done this. He hasn't done that. And I just think people are being too pessimistic. I think the Bills will be a championship contender every year. I don't think they need to make any there are definitely changes that they're going to need to make, and I think we'll get to that in the offseason. But I don't think they need to blow anything up. I don't think they need to, split up Allen and Diggs. I don't think they need to, do anything drastic. I think that they are a very good team that, they could have been a coin toss away from beating the Chiefs and maybe beating the Bengals and maybe winning the Super Bowl last year. Like you never
yeah,
know. And if they win that coin toss and they end up winning the Super Bowl, the discourse is absolutely very different. So I think people need to slow their roll on the hate towards Buffalo.
yeah. I think especially it seemed like there's a little bit of criticism of maybe Sean McDermott is not he's not able to take them to that next level. I mean, he's one of the best coaches in football, and just to take him away from Josh Allen, so it would just be a big mistake in my opinion. Um, they're been a perennial top 5 team in the AFC, I think, since Josh Allen's breakout. And this year, I know they had a lot of expectations. They wanted to win the Super Bowl, but I think just to add on to the defensive side of the ball, the loss of Von Miller clearly hurt them.
Absolutely.
You saw, I mean, I'm a big fan of Ed Oliver, but the rest of that front four, I mean, I know they rotate a lot of guys, but I don't know. I think that that could be an area where they hope to improve upon in the offseason.
Definitely.
Is there anything else you have for this game, or you want to move on to the last game of Sunday?
I think we can move on to the Niners versus Cowboys. And I want to start off with Brock Purdy is decent and he's not the truth. Because here's the thing about Brock Purdy. And I kind of went on this rant last week, so I'm gonna keep it a little bit shorter. But one thing that I noticed is when Brock Purdy misses the spot, a lot of people talk about 50-50 balls, and these great accurate quarterbacks like a Joe Burrow might make a 50-50 ball, 60-40 ball, or certain receivers will make it a 60-40 ball. That a 50-50 ball is not a 50-50 ball with those certain guys because they just do a better job of either if you're talking about a receiver getting to the spot or a quarterback putting it right in the perfect spot. With Brock Purdy, when he misses, it goes from a 50-50 ball to a 35-65 ball. And you saw on that throw to Brandon Ayuk, if he just let him a little bit more, it was a 50-50 ball. It might not have been a touchdown, but it really should have been an interception, and it wasn't.
Yeah,
And that could have changed the whole game.
I think I think I saw that he was credited with no turnover worthy plays, but I don't know. It seemed like you said, a lot of those 50-50 balls were he was putting the advantage on the defensive matchups. And I think Trayvon Diggs had a ball that he probably could have picked off. But yeah, it was overall, it seemed like it was a game the 49ers could have won by a lot more had they gotten better production out of Brock Purdy. But also, I mean, it seemed like Christian McCaffrey was hurting a little bit, which is not great for them.
Yeah. And that's also just like another thing. Like Brock Purdy needs everything to be
Yeah,
perfect around him. And like they really could have lost this game against the Cowboys.
yeah. The
Had it
Cowboys
like if they
had
played the Eagles this week, they would have lost.
yeah the Cowboys had no business being in this game late into the fourth quarter. Like Dak looked pretty awful. Um,
Yeah.
Tony Pollard. I mean, I hope that he's able to be ready for next offseason. He's a free agent now. I don't know um what that
Yeah.
means
He
for
may have
his
missed out
market.
on generational money.
Yeah, I mean he's really really good, and you saw Zeke just doesn't have it anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean the Cowboys will definitely have an interesting offseason. I think Zeke's contract is still like it's still difficult to get out of. Um, so I think he said he would take a pay cut if it meant staying in Dallas. So we'll see. But I don't even know if the Cowboys want him.
Right.
Um, yeah, it'll be
And
interesting.
it'll definitely be interesting what they do. And again, we'll also continue to talk about this into the offseason. But with Tony Pollard, there's definitely a question mark on his explosiveness now. Um,
Yeah,
so what do you want to do? And how can you invest a lot of money into another running back when you've invested so much into Zeke? And it's a very tough situation for the Cowboys to be in. Um, and we'll touch on that more in the offseason.
yep.
Um,
Anything
anything
for
else on the Niners offense?
I think the Niners offense, I think we're pretty much covered it all. Just not their best week.
The one thing I will say is that just Trent Williams is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Only one pressure allowed versus Micah Parsons. He had him in prison. Micah was kind of a non-factor when lined up against Trent Williams. So
Yeah, no,
yeah,
that definitely is proven to be a great extension, even though he's getting paid tons of money. He's
yeah, he
probably
deserves it all.
like he's pretty easily, I'd say, the best tackle in football. Um, I don't know if you have a different opinion, but
No, I agree, and I'm an Andrew Thomas
yeah,
enthusiast. But even you know Trent Williams is undisputed tackle one.
yeah. I think yes, it kind of touched on the Cowboys defense a little bit if you want to talk about them because I don't know how terribly they played. Like I don't think they played.
I think they played pretty well
Yeah,
actually.
I think they played well enough. For I mean, even I'd say an average Dak performance, which just doesn't seem to exist. Um,
Right,
when some of
it's
those
such a
games.
spectrum with him.
um, yeah, I think I don't know. They really shut down that run game, and again, it looked like McCaffrey was hurting, but Eli Mitchell is no slouch, and they did a pretty good job of containing him and getting to him quickly. Um, I don't know if you had anything else about the Cowboys.
Um, Not so much. I do think that they did a pretty good job of, the Niners. What did the Niners have, like 4 field goals, was it?
I
Like they just
yeah,
weren't, yeah, they didn't really like put the ball in the end zone. Um, they had 1 touchdown and 4 field goals. Uh, that's Listen, if the Cowboys don't play like the worst football team of all time, uh, offensively, you can win this game if you are
yeah.
them.
No, I think I mean again we can get to this in the offseason and just to go back on that. This offense, like Dalton Schultz is a free agent. CeeDee Lamb had a great game, but
Phenomenal game.
they had nothing outside of him. Like he was doing his best to get open on every single play.
And even when he
And
wasn't open, like he was making crazy catches.
yeah,
And honestly, I think there was an underthrown ball to him that maybe could have been a touchdown. But just the concentration to remain with the ball was fantastic. Um,
yeah.
and yeah,
I think and if you want to talk, I don't know if there's anything about that Niner defense that either excited about or surprised or concerned for next week against the Eagles.
I feel good about it. The only thing I have to say is Fred Warner is just the best linebacker in football.
Yeah.
He's so smart and he's so athletic and he's just such a great tackler, and he embodies the perfect linebacker. He's I think he's the best linebacker since Luke Kuechly,
That's high
which
praise.
is high praise. I think he might be better than Bobby Wagner ever was. They're two very separate types of
Yeah,
linebackers. They don't really do the same kind of stuff. But Fred Warner is he's so good. It's unbelievable what Fred Warner can do.
yeah. I mean, Fred Warner is like a cornerback playing linebacker, but yet he also tackles like prime CJ Mosley. Like
Right.
he
He's unbelievable.
yeah, it's just I don't think I don't know if there's anyone like him in that regard at linebacker right now. Um anything any concerns or anything else for this defense?
Not for the defense, but just to run back quickly to the Cowboys offense is I think you're kind of in QB limbo if you're the Cowboys, because you're not in QB limbo because you have to stick with Dak, but I think
Yeah.
it puts you in a kind of it puts you in a crappy position where you don't know what you're going to do because Dak is going to get paid $50 million next year. And then he is going to be either terrible for half the games or like Mahomes for the other half of the games. And you just can't have that inconsistency. And like I said last week, you're going to either like this team goes as far as Dak Prescott takes them, because if Dak Prescott has a game like he did against the Buccaneers, this team can win a Super Bowl. But if Dak Prescott plays like he did today, this team looks terrible and shouldn't even be a playoff team. Um,
Yeah,
and
it's definitely I think a conversation of the Cowboys. I don't know if they have had it or will be having is Dak Prescott a good enough quarterback to carry or lead his team to a Super Bowl?
yeah, and I don't know how you move on from him. It's
I
like
mean,
I don't know what this situation is,
based on the
but
contract, you just can't do it. I don't think until at least after 2024 season. Um,
right. And who are you going to replace him with? It's hard.
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they think they have something in Cooper Rush.
I no.
No, just no. Um,
No. I mean, he played valiantly as a backup quarterback, but he's not a starter or a replacement for Dak. I mean, maybe given that Dak's getting paid superhuman money, um, but that's a different conversation.
yeah. Um, is there anything else on this game, or do you want to move on to the next segment?
I think we can move on to our hot takes.
Yep. So now we'll be throwing the red flag. Harry, do you want to give your take first?
I would. And it actually kind of does have to do with Dak Prescott a little bit. He wasn't the only NFC East quarterback to influence this. My hot take, now some of it's not a hot take. It's not like the hottest take ever, but there's levels to this. So the first level is I think if Trey Lance becomes an available quarterback for any of these teams in QB limbo, the Giants, I think they should like if Brock Purdy is the truth in Kyle Shanahan's eyes, teams should be willing to sell the farm for a guy like Trey Lance. Not sell the farm, but teams should be willing to trade even as much as a first round pick for a guy like Trey Lance. And I think a team specifically like the Giants, who I think anybody can go into that system in Daboll's system and be a semi competent quarterback, but having a guy like Trey Lance can, you know, elevate that offense into something special. And I think another thing about it is that Trey Lance is going to be on that rookie contract and you're not going to have to pay him. And then you can build a roster around him. And you're not going to find yourself in a situation like the Cowboys do with Dak Prescott, where they're paying him forever amounts of money to be volatile, which is honestly how I would describe Trey Lance right now.
Yeah. I mean, we just really haven't seen enough of him, so I don't even know if you could characterize, like,
Right.
use one
But
word.
just like based on his college tape,
Yeah,
um, I would describe him as a little volatile. And I think teams should be running at the mill to trade for him. And I think teams should be a little bit more wary about giving these behemoth contract extensions to quarterbacks who are not quarterbacks that elevate talent. Like a guy like Dak Prescott may be a very good quarterback. He may be even a great quarterback, but he's not elevating the Cowboys. Whereas like a guy like Joe Burrow elevates the Bengals, a guy like Mahomes elevates the Chiefs, a guy like Herbert elevates the Chargers.
Yeah.
He's not an elevator, and I think teams should be wary about signing these non-elevators.
I think that's a fair. My question is, if you're talking about in context of the Giants, do you think after this kind of miracle season, Joe Shane and Brian Dable would be willing to kind of start over with a different quarterback?
I don't think that they will be willing to. I don't think that they end up doing it. I don't think that they honestly have the balls to do it. As much as I love Brian Daboll, I don't think he has the balls to do it in a city like New York, because if it ends up going poorly, it's over for him. He's gonna
Yeah,
lose the respect of the fan base, and he has no room for error really. But I think I would like to see them trade for a guy like Trey Lance. I don't think they will, but if I was running the ship, I would trade for Trey Lance.
I think, I think that, I mean, if for some reason the 49ers go into next year and say make Trey Lance available, which I don't, the only way I could see them doing that is like if they could convince Tom Brady to come out there or something. But I don't know. I don't know why you wouldn't give him a shot, if especially like depending on what the 49ers would be asking for, considering the upside.
Right. I did
And
see a quote
yeah,
that said
what
that Kyle Shanahan viewed Brock Purdy as QB1, which is what instigated this take.
wow, that is interesting.
Unless he said unless something drastic happened, Brock Purdy was gonna be QB1, and he said nothing is up in the air, and I don't know, who knows, maybe that's just trying to give a confidence boost to your young quarterback in the playoffs. Who knows exactly what the situation is, but that's where I got that from.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting then. Um, I think that there are ways to say that without saying what Kyle Shanahan said.
Yeah, I
So
definitely don't agree with the quote.
yeah. So
But
I think that the fact that he went that far maybe means the Trey Lance. I don't know. It's not like when you have Brock Purdy making the money that he's making and Trey Lance still on a rookie deal, like you can afford to keep both of them.
right.
Um, but yeah, I guess we'll see. Yeah. Do you have anything else that you want to add to
This is just going back to the Giants. Is I think the Giants have the 25th pick this season. And if Trey
is
Lance
that
becomes available for that 25th pick, I don't think they should hesitate to make that trade.
even with, but if you're saying that in that scenario, do you have them making a move like franchising Daniel Jones and then letting Lance get healthy and just sit behind him, or do you think he's ready to go right now?
I think Lance is ready to go. I think Lance has sat, and I think Lance is ready to go. Now, I don't know. I'm not in the NFL realm. And I think one way or the other, you have Tyrod Taylor on the Giants. And Tyrod Taylor is the quarterback that bridges you between like a mediocre quarterback to Tyrod Taylor to a franchise quarterback. You saw it with Josh Allen, you saw it with Herbert, you saw it with Baker,
Yeah.
who Baker's not a franchise guy, but he was for a little bit of time.
Yep.
So you know, if history repeats itself, um,
Yeah. Could be. I mean, not he's definitely a good backup to have. And I don't know, considering what Brian Dable did out of this Giants team, who knows next year with some money to play with and guys just progressing.
right.
I don't know. Like if anyone can make a Tyrod Taylor led offense work, it's Brian Dable.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah. So if you're ready for me to give my take, which I have a feeling you won't agree with, but
I'd love to hear it.
okay. My hot take, also having to do with the Giants. The Giants should not extend Saquon Barkley. And
Mm,
I'm going to preface this by saying they should definitely franchise tag him because I don't see how he wouldn't play on the franchise tag. I mean, I think you'd piss him off by doing it, but I know he said that he's not looking to reset the market and he's realistic coming off injury. I don't know how much you can trust running backs after, like, I mean, the lifespan of a running back in the NFL has become so short. And you've seen it. I mean, we're talking about Zeke earlier, and he looked so good earlier in his career. And now it's just like, obviously, that's an extreme because that was a 6-year deal. I doubt Saquon would get that. Um, but I think that I saw this week, there's one play where he cut it to the outside, and a play that in his rookie year that he would have taken it to the house. His top speed, he only got up to 19 miles per hour, which is obviously still incredible, but for NFL standards, and especially when he was hitting 22 earlier in the year and in his rookie year, um, I don't know. Like, I think, don't get me wrong, Saquon has proven this year that when healthy, he's a top running back in the league. But I don't know if you're the Giants, if you want to get stuck with paying a running back for the next 4 years when he'll be his age 30 season in the last year of that deal.
right. I think a more realistic deal would be 3 years for Saquon if he's going to receive McCaffrey money. Um, so I do
That's
think that that's
yeah,
kind of another angle where I'm approaching it from is one less year. But I do think that I am going to disagree with your take. I do think that the Giants' offense is so dependent upon Saquon Barkley. It's like the Titans are so dependent upon Derrick Henry, and the Browns have historically been so dependent on Nick Chubb, and like even the Niners this season are so dependent upon Christian McCaffrey. Although they are, it's not just Christian McCaffrey. It's a little bit of a different situation. I think the Titans are the better example, where it's
yeah,
like Saquon Barkley is the entire team
yeah.
or offense. He's the entire offense, and I think if you have Saquon Barkley in this offense, and it's QB proof to be, well, not QB proof. Like I don't think you could put Brock Purdy, but I think it's like I think you can put in any like decent quarterback in the offense, and they would be a good. They would be good because of just how well the scheme balances off of Saquon Barkley.
I understand that, and the reason that this was a hot take, and one I'm not even sure I fully agree with, just because what the question becomes, what do you do in free agency? You're not the Giants with the state of their roster, they can't justify taking someone like Bijan in round one, um, or even maybe in the second round. I don't think they could justify taking a running back. I don't even know if you're going to get that type of difference maker in the second round. Um, and free agency, I don't know how many options there are better than Saquon. I mean, the answer is none, but I mean, that could provide better value. Depending on, it'll be interesting to see like Tony Pollard's market based on the injury, but to bet on him coming off that injury, I don't know if you want to do that. So definitely Saquon Barkley has to be back with the Giants for next year. I would just be wary of giving him that long term. Like, I'd go with you 3 years max, a deal that maybe you could even get out of in that third year if you needed to. Um, but yeah, I mean, the Giants offense, what they were able to do with so few weapons, I think that if you're the Giants, you don't want to get to a point where you're just losing your best one and then having to replace him. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, definitely you want to keep Saquon around. I just don't know. Long-term deal, I think, could be a mistake.
Yeah, I do think that there are smart ways to structure the deal and dumb ways to structure it. Um, but overall, I think that it's very imperative that they re-sign him.
Okay.
Shall we move to our predictions?
Yep, let's talk about this week's the championship week. I think the 49ers Eagles game
Eagles is
is the
first.
early game, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, take it away.
Going into the playoffs, I picked the Niners to be the NFC champions, and by no means would I be surprised if they do so. Um, but as of right now, I think the Eagles are too complete. I think the Eagles have played their best brand of football in the last week. I think they've displayed it, and I know the Giants didn't play well, and that was part of the reason. But the Cowboys really didn't play well either, and the Niners didn't take advantage of it in the same way. And I think I was a believer in the Niners, but I think right now I'm picking the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, along the same lines, I also have the Niners going to the Super Bowl for the NFC. And I think what it really comes down to for me is that the Eagles have the better offensive line. I think we can agree. Um, the wide receiver position is really that's close. Obviously you have Travis Kelce, and in the backfield, the 49ers have the clear edge. Jalen Hurts, if he has, depending on his game, he could really prove. Like, I already think, obviously, after the year he's had, he's a top 10 quarterback in football, but he could prove that he's able to lead and carry this team to the Super Bowl with a good game. So I think a lot of it depends on Jalen Hurts. And I don't know, it'll be interesting from the 49ers perspective. Brock Purdy, how does he hold up on the road? I think for the first time this postseason. And like interesting, like player's been very underrated for a long time. He's been great for them this year. Charles Omenihu, his situation off the field, is he going to play this weekend? That could be, I mean, not a big loss, but
It
could
could
be
be a difference
significant.
maker.
Yeah. Yeah, so I agree with you. I think the Eagles probably should win, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Niners were able to take it.
The Eagles are a 2.5 point favorite, which means that Vegas kind of would view this as a pick'em game at an even playing field. Not that Vegas is tell all, but yeah, I do think that this is a very close matchup, but I think the Eagles are kind of just riding higher. And when I think things are kind of pretty even, I'm gonna lean towards who do I think is the quarterback that can elevate. And I think Jalen Hurts hasn't necessarily he's shown that he's a very good quarterback in a very good system. He hasn't shown that he's an elevator just yet. But I do think that this is going to be the game where he shows that he is an elevator and he can elevate the Eagles and the Niners when he's the one who needs to be the difference maker. Or he can elevate the Eagles in a game against the Niners where he needs to be the one to elevate.
Yeah, I think it'll be a very telling week for Jalen Hurts and this Eagles team. And just you brought it up, so now I'm curious. What do you like any particular bet? Would you take the Eagles at?
I would take the
just
Eagles at -2.5.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty good. I just can't see this game getting to the point where I think if the Eagles win, I'd assume they'd win it by more than 3.
Yeah, I do think so too.
So with that being said, do you have a score prediction for this weekend? If you want to give that.
I think my score prediction, it's going to be the -2.5. It's going to be 24-21 Eagles. I think the Eagles offense hasn't met a Niners. Like, I don't think Jalen Hurts has had to deal with a linebacker like Fred Warner. And the safeties and Nick Bosa is just so good. Like I think this Niners defense is really good, and I don't think the Eagles have met a team like that, even though they didn't play so well against the Cowboys. but I think it will kind of lower down the value of this offense. And I'm going 24-21 Philadelphia Eagles.
I was along a similar line. I'm going to go 27-21 Eagles as well. And I agree. I don't think Jalen Hurts has a great game, but I think he does enough, and that defense does enough against Brock Purdy to come out of the link with the win. And also, I mean, a huge factor, I don't think we mentioned this in this part of the show, but how's Christian McCaffrey's, I believe it's his calf. I don't know what seemed to be bothering. Yeah. Because last week he just did not look like the Christian McCaffrey that the San Francisco 49ers have been getting this year.
And that's, I think, part of the reason that they struggled.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm a big fan of Eli Mitchell, but there's no comparison. So
yeah,
you gotta, I mean, if Christian McCaffrey is not healthy, I don't see how the Niners, it would be really tough for the Niners to win this game.
Absolutely.
And
on it to the Bengals Chiefs, or do you have something more to say?
No, I was just gonna say, do you have anything else before we move on? But let's move on.
Bengals Chiefs. I think this is going to be, I mean, it definitely depends on Mahomes' health, how good of a game this will be. This was my prediction for the AFC Championship going into the playoffs.
Did you have Eagles Niners on the other side?
I also had Eagles Niners on the other side.
Very nice.
So my playoff bracket is still alive. This is another situation where I'm going against what I initially picked. And in my original playoff picks, I picked the Bengals to beat the Chiefs, and then I went back on it, and I was like, actually, I think the Chiefs are going to be the team to represent the AFC in the Super Bowl. But I'm going back with the Mahomes injury. We don't know what the situation is, and so with information, if Mahomes is Mahomes, I do think the Chiefs actually do come out with it just by a sliver. But I think if not, that's going to be the difference maker. And I think the Bengals and Joe Burrow are too good and they're too hot. They've been arguably the hottest team, maybe behind the Niners in football since the second half of the season started. And I do think that the Bengals are going to come out with it. And I think the Bengals will win 28-21.
Okay. I think, just to kind of piggyback on what you just said, first of all, congratulations. Very nice predictions.
Hey, thanks, man.
And with I think Tony Romo said this on the broadcast. If Patrick Mahomes is a pocket, just confined to the pocket, he's still probably the best pocket passer in the league, except for the QB he's playing against, and that's Joe Burrow. And I think if Mahomes, which seems like with that high ankle sprain, he's not going to have that mobility. If he can't be even normal Patrick Mahomes, then I just see the Chiefs having a tough time winning this game. Although, again, with the Bengals going to Kansas City, we said this about Buffalo last week. Arrowhead's a tough place to play. But I don't know. I think I'm gonna go with the Chiefs for this one, and I'll say they win 31-28.
Lovely predictions. And I will say, I bet on the Bengals to be the Super Bowl champions in, I think, week 15 or 16, or maybe week 17. It was the week when they played against the Bills. So actually, no, that's week 17.
That's week 17. Yeah. That looks promising.
Looking pretty good. It looks pretty promising right now.
I think, just to relating to that, I think that these are probably two best teams in the NFL right now. Which is not to say that the winner of this will win the Super Bowl, although they probably will be the favorite. So this has all the makings of a really fun game. That I think the rematch from last year, I think we kind of cheated of that a little bit. Maybe not as good of a game as we thought it could have been last year, but
yeah.
Hopefully this year
I think with Mahomes and Burrow both fully healthy. Now, Burrow is fully healthy. I think with Mahomes fully healthy, this is a classic game where it's pick 'em. I think any team wins, and it's tough to say, but I just think with Mahomes being a tick slower and just not being able to move the way he does, not being able to extend plays the way he does, I think that's the difference maker. And I think, we've seen the Bengals defensive front do a pretty good job of putting pressure on quarterbacks in the playoffs. And I think Mahomes is going to need that mobility, and he's just not going to have it. And that's going to be the difference maker between the Bengals winning and the Chiefs winning.
Yeah, I think just to add on to that, I think Orlando Brown and Andrew Wiley have had both allowed, I think, over 40 pressures this year, top 10 in football. And
right,
like with tackles like that, if Mahomes is going to be confined to the pocket, you got to watch out for Sam Hubbard. You got to watch out for Trey Hendrickson. You got to Joseph Osai as an occasional pass rusher has been solid. So I think, yeah, Mahomes is going to have his work cut out for him. But at the end of the day, this seems like the big stage. That's where Patrick Mahomes thrives.
yeah. And one thing that is interesting, though, is Mahomes was pressured 13 times against the Jaguars and was sacked 0 times. So he's still doing a good job of staying active and being mobile. But I don't think, I think the Bengals are going into the game knowing that
Yes. And
you have to limit Mahomes's mobility.
I think
or Mahomes has limited mobility.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that was last week. He had that kind of adrenaline of getting back in there, but now with a week later, you don't know the state of his ankle. So I think the Bengals are ready to attack him. So we'll see. Should be a fun weekend or fun Sunday this week. Anything else before we wrap up?
I think that's all I got.
Okay. Thank you all for listening. This has been the Check Down Pod. We'll see you next week after the championship games.
Have a good one.